fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. Got my friend Dave Fladd from Ice Strike on the call with me. This is going to be a real cool one. One, we are going to talk a little bit about jig heads and colors and all that, but the main focus here is going to be, gator trout. And really, obviously, it's not just gator trout, because depending on where you are, a gator trout, could mean you have to be 27 inches or more. But really talking about this release over 20 so that we do have more gator trout all over, from Texas to North Carolina, Virginia, wherever you might be fishing for speckled trout. And Dave's done something really unique with this release over 20. I've been hearing about it quite a bit, and I reached out to Dave and I was like, man, we got to get you on the podcast to discuss what's going on. So first and foremost, welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks a lot, Joe. It's really an honor to have to be on the show and to talk about this stuff. Big fan of Salt Strong, and like you said, I've been watching Salt Strong and watching it grow along with our business, and just really admire what you guys are doing. So good job.
Ditto. I just had quite a few, I think a couple hundred jig heads of your Ice Strike jig heads delivered to my house. So I'm a big fan of your jig heads for our soft plastics. But so let's talk about the backstory. Like, how did you get in this? I heard you were like an optics engineer or something. Like, what's the backstory to your fishing?
Yeah. So unlike I listen to a lot of these podcasts, and I hear the story sounds pretty similar. Dad, grandpa took me when I was 4 years old. I'm the exception to that rule. My father died when I was 3 years old from cancer, so I grew up with just a mother, and we were lucky to have a lake house. I'm originally from Western New York, and we had a little lake house, and I would fish a lot. We couldn't really have anyone to take me, so I would literally fish for like rock bass under the dock, tying a piece of mono to my finger and look through the dock slats and watching it, approach it and eat the lure. And, so it wasn't a huge amount of fishing, but I always did really enjoy it. It wasn't until I moved to Charleston about 22 years ago, had a friend. This is how a lot of people start fishing here. They have a friend who takes them trout fishing, and, you go out and catch 15, 20 trout, and it's like, all right, this is awesome. Yeah. I need to buy a boat. I need to figure out how to do this. That was my story. So I've been fishing about 15 years now, and kind of slowly becoming better just by reading, absorbing everything I could find about, how to catch fish better. And then I kind of felt like I was on a plateau. I'm like, how am I ever going to get any better? I don't feel like I was advancing. And then I was lucky enough to hear about a fishing club that was starting by a guy named Ralph Phillips. And he was a guy I went and saw a seminar once with. He's kind of like a legend in Charleston. Most people here know him. He's like a household name. Reason is that he was one of like 3 original fishing guides in Charleston 45 years ago. So he's seen and done it all. And he had an idea to start a family-based fishing club here in Somerville. And I was really interested in that because I wanted to learn more. So I went and volunteered to be on the board. And we ended up, becoming sort of hitting it off and becoming friends, and then fishing partners, and now business partners in Ice Strike. So that's kind of my backstory, how I became, where I am right now.
Too cool. So did you guys, because I don't know the whole backstory of Ice Strike. I know you guys have been around for a while now, probably about the same amount as time as we are, 5 years or so. Mm-hmm. Was it a problem you guys saw there? Were you trying to create like the perfect jig head for speckled trout and redfish? Like I'm curious on how that came about.
Yeah. So it's really kind of a neat story. Like, he used to fish. He was known for fishing a jig head that had an eye on it. If you recall the Coty jigs that had like a painted eye. And they were like, at the time, they were the only sort of quality jig that had a fairly big eye that's painted on it. And, just through the process of fishing together, talking, telling stories, he's like, when he used to fish offshore a lot for marlin and stuff. And he said, we used to troll these big lures, and all the big plugs had just enormous eyes on them. Because I always wanted to have a jig head that was like just a big eye. Nothing like a big eye. And, I was like, well, let's just, let's make our own. Let's try it. So I'm an engineer, so I'm like, I can do that. So we went about having a custom mold made, just those little, have you seen those little do-it molds that you can you pour like 6 jigs at a time?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've never used it personally.
You know what I mean? It's like you can do it in your garage, So they actually sell molds that are blank. And if you can find someone to machine them, which I've figured out quickly is really difficult to find someone that has the equipment that can cut the little tiny features that you need, at least that we needed. Finally found someone to do it and came up with this design that's pretty much nothing but an eye, with a little bit of a nose on it, but the main design feature is an eye. We poured those, went out the first day to try them, not knowing at all how they'd work, and had like an incredible day of catching, like step change difference. Quality fish, inshore slam plus a few other trash fish and just a lot of variety. And that's when we were like, wow, this is really maybe something. We're onto something here, And I think my opinion is that it's picture you're a fish and something goes across your field of vision, it's either a threat or it's something to eat, or it's just like a stick or something like that. So what's the determining factor in that's something that I need to eat? And we believe it's the eye. So the bigger that eye, from a further distance, it can be identified as, okay, this is a small bait fish swimming by. Instinct is to attack it. So that's the working theory around why we make these jig heads with the biggest eye possible.
Yeah, it certainly takes up the majority of the jig head. But they look cool. They skip well. Like I love them, man. I mean, it's pretty much what we use 95% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool story. So how did this release over 20 thing happen? And I want to throw out a quick stat, because this is, and I know there's a bunch of them, this is the one that kind of got my attention. I think someone had tagged me on an Instagram post, and it was something to the effect of like all speckled trout over 20 inches are female. Not everyone, but almost all of them over 20 are female. Is that correct?
That's correct. If you catch a trout that's, 22, 23 inches and it croaks and it's a male, that's a gator trout. That's like a 7 or 8 year old trout. So it's kind of contradictory. It's like, think, oh, it's kind of an average trout. But if it's a male trout that size, that's an old trout.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the whole concept of this is just, it sort of grew from something I started a long time ago. And literally it's like being on a fishing forum here in Charleston, and one of the older guys saying how he releases big trout. And I know some people that are pretty in tune with like how the fisheries legislations are changed here in South Carolina. And one day I asked him, what are the chances of ever having an upper slot for trout? Because, catching a big trout is like a really desirable thing and all that. And he said it's pretty much zero. And it's a complicated reason why it's political here in South Carolina, how laws are made. And it kind of got me to thinking, well, what can I do to make an impact? Well, why can't I just make my own upper slot? Pick a number. It could be it could be any number you could think of. And for me, it was 20 inches. I said, well, okay, a 20-inch trout is rare. It's not easy. In a year, I don't know, I might catch 20-inch trout. So it's a pretty good sized trout here in Charleston. Mm-hmm. And if I catch any that are over 20, I'm just automatically going to put it back no matter what. That's my upper slot. So this is what I chose to do myself. And then on forums or on social media, I would, sometimes catch a big one, 23, 24 inches, and I'd say, caught this, and here's a picture of me releasing it, just like I release all my trout over 20, something like that. Not preaching to anyone, just saying this is why I do it, leading by example. And then, sometimes we'll go to an event, we'll have like a booth at a expo or something like that, and I started having people come up who I've never met and saying, I release all my trout over 20 because, I read that you do that, and I really agree with it. And I was like, that's really cool. If you can get enough people to do it, maybe you can move the needle and have, in effect, you could have an upper slot. You might really be making a difference, even though there's not a law that makes you release them. You can just voluntarily release them. And I think what I'd like to say is that, this isn't really about 100% about trout or about 20 inches. It's more a philosophy of why can't we set our own catch and creel limits that are more restrictive than the law allows? And this could be flounder. You could say my limit's going to be 18-inch trout. You could say instead of being allowed to keep 10 trout, and I'm only going to keep 2. It's that kind of mentality. But the release over 20 for trout is just kind of something for people to latch onto and sort of rally around. But it's really more than that. So if that makes sense.
It does. Do any states, from Texas all the way up to past where you are, do any of them have any upper slots on trout? I don't think they do, but
I think portions of Texas do, but don't quote me on that because I'm not sure. But it seems like every year in other states the laws are changing a lot more proactively than they do in South Carolina. I'll tell you that. But I did want to say kind of like some of the motivation behind this, and this is really important, I think, and that is the resource, the fisheries resource is fixed. You've got a certain amount of habitat, a certain amount of waterways, and I think you can make a compelling argument that over time, water quality is decreasing, habitat's decreasing, so you can't even really say that the resource is fixed. The resource is probably in decline just from that alone. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
Yep.
Look at the Indian River Lagoon and the loss of seagrass and all that stuff. It's that way pretty much everywhere. And on the flip side, there's a whole lot more population growth on the coast. There's a lot more people interested in fishing. The technology is vastly increasing. You've got side scan where you can actually see fish under docks. You've got companies like us and Saltstrong doing a lot to educate the public on how to better target and catch fish. So the pressure on the resource is increasing exponentially. However, the laws, there's no way that they can keep up, to not really prevent these fisheries from almost collapsing. So this is kind of like, here's another thing. Everyone's perception of the numbers of fish is relative to each other, right? I've been fishing here for 15 years. I can definitely see a decline, especially in redfish, also in flounder. It's a little bit hard for me to say because I'm a lot better fisherman now than I was 15 years ago. So, I couldn't catch as many then, I don't think. But I remember seeing like huge schools of redfish on certain flats that simply aren't there anymore. And also I'm a recreational tagger. So I tag redfish and you get recapture returns. And one thing you notice about redfish in particular is that they live on the same structure. They'll come back to the same piece of structure year after year after year. And it's really obvious that if every boat that hits that structure kept their limit of redfish. Like, how many redfish you think are on that structure? Maybe, at the most 20, 25. You can clean that spot out in a day, and then those fish are never there again. On the contrary, if you catch a tagged fish, it should be very clear that you wouldn't have caught that fish if someone hadn't caught and released it. You see what I mean?
True.
But my point is, me being business partners with someone like Ralph, he's fished here for 50 years. He was one of 3 original guides here. And the stories that he tells of the bounty of fish that used to be here in Charleston is you're almost like, yeah, come on. You know what I mean? But it's true. For example, he had once had a stringer of trout that averaged over 5 pounds. It was like 12 trout averaging over 5 pounds.
Wow.
Unthinkable here in Charleston today. There's no way that could happen. He used to talk about schools of, 20 to 30 pound striper in the Cooper River. There's still a few striper around, but you wouldn't find them in those kind of numbers and sizes at all. Jack Crevalle used to be all over Charleston. There's a fly fishing world record that was set here once. They've come back a little bit, but nothing like, it used to be like a nuisance, almost like Florida. They were missing for years and years and years from Charleston. They just recently started making a reappearance. But, back then, there was such a bounty of fish that they thought it was inexhaustible. They could just catch and keep whatever they want. They could never put a dent in it. So the difference between then and now, it's like people like myself who have never experienced it almost can't believe it. But certainly the potential bounty of fish is way more than we can even imagine, So Release Over 20 is just kind of a way to say, what can we as fishing guides, recreational anglers, what can we do without waiting for a law, for someone to tell you what to do? How can you make an impact today on a personal level? And I'm not saying don't keep any fish. I eat fish all the time. I'll keep a couple, like maybe 1 or 2, 3 smaller trout, little redfish, something like that, just to eat fresh that night. Never freeze it. But, release the big ones, make an upper slot, let those keep breeding. There's some other facts about, why you should release a big trout. And, one is that their egg production increases exponentially. So like a 20-inch trout releases probably over 20 million eggs in a season, whereas like a smaller trout.
20 million?
20 million. They breed several times in a season. And like an 11-inch trout is about 3 million a year. So the thing is, the eggs that are spawned by a larger trout are of much more value than a small trout. The reason is that they're passing on the genetics of whatever was allowing them to become a big trout, whether it's resistance to cold, resistance to disease. Maybe they just grow faster, like a basketball player just genetically grows faster than anyone else or grows bigger. So to pass those genetics on to future generations is much more valuable than the smaller ones. And, another thing is that like a 20-inch trout, so this is right out of the South Carolina DNR trout book, based on research. A 20-inch trout's about 4 years old.
Okay.
And the rarity of a 20-inch trout is that if you start with 1,000 trout at year 0, after 4 years, only 8 trout will remain of 20-inch size.
Okay, so we have 1,000 trout, let's just say, are born today, and at year 4, they're 20 inches, and only 8 of those 1,000 will be alive?
That's right.
Wow.
So imagine how rare is a 28, 27-inch trout.
Yeah. I guess
super valuable.
Yeah, not
fish.
Even one. Yeah, maybe 1 out of 1,000. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's probably even less than that.
Less than that, yeah.
And and for selfish reasons, we all are recently even more excited about catching a citation, thanks to Chris Bush at Speckled Trout, good friend of ours. We're big supporters of his. And I personally have a goal. I want to catch a 27-inch trout in Charleston. That's extremely rare. Other parts of the country, that's a good trout, but there's, it's all relative again. It could, 30-inch could be, a stretch goal. A 30-inch trout here is extremely stretch goal, maybe impossible. But, we want to catch bigger trout. So we carefully catch and release these 20-inch trout, essentially making an upper slot. Certainly there'll be a lot more of those fish swimming around in 4 or 5 years.
Well, makes sense, right? I mean, the easiest way to catch bigger fish is keep releasing the bigger ones you're catching. And same with, I grew up in a lake, same with bass, right? And let's throw this thing back, and a year later it's going to be bigger.
That's right.
It makes sense. I've never kept a really big trout myself. Not to be, hey, I'm the hero, but usually it's rare that we catch those really big ones. I have caught 27 and above. I've never broken through 30, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because I have in my mindset that a gator trout or a really big trout doesn't even taste as good. I mean, is there any? I don't know if there's any science behind that, but what have you heard in terms of people that have kept and cleaned? Because I know there are people that will disagree with some of this message that just keep anything. If it's legal, they're not breaking a law. What are your thoughts on that in terms of taste?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't either. I have, and I will say this, I have kept 2 of the biggest trout that I've caught. And the reason is that it happened to be in a tournament. And this is kind of before I was kind of not really on board myself yet with this idea. I was really contradicted because I caught, one of the biggest trout of my life, 25 inches, and it's in a tournament. So what do you do? I really want to release this trout, but, for selfish reasons, I really want to do well in the tournament as well. And as a result of that, I sort of lobbied our fishing club to do what the kayakers do, which is catch photo release tournaments, where you lay that fish on a ruler, take a good quality photograph of it, and then let it go. And I think that's a lot more, ethical way to do a tournament. I think the kayakers have it right. Yep. They do it right.
And so are you guys giving stickers out too, like the citations that Chris does? Okay.
Yeah. So we have a cool logo that we had made up. And if you look on our so we really want to encourage people to follow our Instagram page at releaseover20. Yep. And we also have those stickers right now for sale at our webpage, istrikefishing.com. And the reason for that is just that we already have the merchant account system set up. And we're not making money on these. We're selling them for $1.75. That includes the sticker, it includes the envelope and the stamps. But we just want, that as many people to get a sticker or display it. If you agree with it, if you're on board with the whole thing yourself and, want to set your own limits and release those big trout, it's voluntary. And, I just wanted to say this one thing that, we're partnering with, CCA in North Carolina. Really honored to have them on board. The reach and the resources of CCA is really impressive. And a guy named Joe Neely was listening to me talk about this Release Over 20. It wasn't even Release Over 20 at that point. I was just talking about this philosophy on a different podcast. And he happened to be listening to it and got a hold of me and said, this is 100% in line with what we value here in North Carolina. And let's, if you don't mind, we'd like to latch onto this and make this a major initiative of North Carolina. And so really, I got to thank Joe for sort of spurring this on and making it a thing, giving it a name, Release Over 20, having a logo to go with it, starting to promote it and get it going. It's not just iStrike. This was a sort of something that we were cooking up, but thanks to CCA, we're hoping to make this thing a really big thing. And, hopefully a national initiative that becomes really big. We've got some ideas that I think I just encourage people to follow that Instagram, because we're not ready to announce it yet, but we've got some really neat things that I think will make it worthwhile to be involved, like giveaways and incentives to participate in the program, and ways that we can start tracking how many 20-inch trout are released, that kind of thing. And I think, people will resist it, but hopefully more and more people will buy into it. And with time, we'll be able to move the needle and make a difference. That would be really awesome.
So what is the ultimate goal? Clearly to get more people to release, but do you guys have like a number that, hey, we want to release 10,000, trout over 20 inches? Do you guys have any kind of like written down goal for the future?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. It's still really early. So, coordinating it between us and North Carolina, and then how much reach this thing might have, we're still kind of working all that out. We still have businesses to run, and, this is not really something that we're making a profit on. So trying to run iStrike, trying to run CCA, we're doing this in our free time. So, but I will say this, we do plan to do more, in terms of setting goals like that, making ways to participate, incentives to participate, getting more, organizations and, companies involved to backing it, and making it really as big as we can. I think the more participation, the better. There's no downside, really.
No, and that's how I look at it. Is it's only has upside. There's certainly people that will disagree with it, just like catch and release fishing, right? I mean, 30, 40 years ago, that was not in our vernacular. That was unheard of. That was like, what are you talking about? You would have been slapped at a boat ramp if you went up, and even we're talking about catch and release fishing, but slowly, because of movements like this, anglers who are serious about, our fisheries and want to make sure our kids and grandkids have the same opportunities, that we have more of those Ralph Phillips stories, right? Of not necessarily, having that big of a stringer, but just having that opportunity to catch those type of fish. It took some people getting serious to over time making it just like, hey, a catch and release is a thing, and it's necessary and needed, because if everyone kept the limit, obviously fishing would be done. And I'm with you. I don't think it's just South Carolina that's political. I think all states are quite political when it comes to this stuff. It's there's no perfect solution to it. So yeah, I'm proud of what you're doing there.
Thank you.
What about like redfish? Have you guys even looked at that? I'm just curious in terms of a release, or is this going to start with trout and try to start where you guys are and move throughout Texas to Virginia area?
Yeah. So I don't know that we'll have like a release over flounder, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it's more a way to rally around the premise of it, which is, like I said, it's like setting your own personal catch and creel limits for whatever. It's just changing the mindset.
Got it.
And it absolutely applies. Like, for example, just personal example again, I'm not preaching to anyone, but I watched a couple seminars from our DNR about flounder, and they made a very compelling argument where, they've been tracking abundance of flounder for 10 years, like literally on a several times a week basis. And they have a way to sample that's statistical. They can tell, and they're monitoring all different rivers, estuaries, and plotting it out. Well, there's noise to that, but you can see trends over time. And the numbers of flounder are steadily declining over the last 10 years. And again, it's all relative. Like, I can go out and catch some flounder and say, oh, the flounder's better than it was 2 years ago. But it's not. We don't know what it was like 10 years ago. There should be a lot more flounder in our estuaries than there are. And it turns out flounder migrate along the Carolinas and Georgia and whatnot. And it's a shared resource between states.
Yep.
Well, as a result of watching that, last fall, I had a really good year for flounder. I caught probably 5 flounder over 22 inches, and I kept them all. And the thing is, flounder are great to eat. How many people who catch a keeper flounder keep it? I would say most,
Yep.
if not all of them. Who throws away a flounder? I mean, they're awesome. But I didn't know there was a problem. Now that I understand what's going on, and the flounder are kind of close to collapse, North Carolina already closed the season. South Carolina is trying to figure out what they're going to do. They're going to do something. Closed season, upper slot, I don't know what. They're going to do something. And I was like, okay, well, not after I saw that, well, I'm just going to tag and release every flounder I catch this year. My wife's not too happy with me about that. I'm like, I caught a 19-inch flounder. Let it, tag and release. She's like, ah. But it's the right thing to do. Those are every flounder over, I think, 13 inches is female.
Wow.
So we're keeping all the females. So what do you expect's going to happen? It's not an unlimited resource.
Yep. Man, that's
and I'm not saying everyone should do that. That's just what I do because I feel it's the right thing to do. But
yep.
Definitely not preaching. Just saying, here's another idea.
So if we don't make a change, like, what do you think the future of gator trout? And I know talking to Chris Bush quite a bit at the Speckled Truth, who's tracking a lot of this stuff, and obviously there's a lot of citations being sent out, but compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly fewer of those big 30-plus inchers in the Indian River and Mosquito Lagoon area. But they're still there. What do you think is the overall future of these big gator trout that we all love to target?
It can't get better. I mean, think about it. The habitat's declining, the water quality is declining, the pressure's increasing. Period. But I will say this, not just us, but there's a lot of other places that have really, been putting on social media and just talking about catch and release and, handling the fish, best practices for, handling a fish and releasing a fish so it survives. And those probably are making a difference. I believe that they are. So, I mean, I think probably the majority of anglers do care about conservation and sustainability. They want their kids to be able to catch fish. So I'm hoping that not just release over 20, but people in general will start having more of a conservation mindset. And that's really that we have to. I mean, because just for the same reason I said, you can see the decline. You could talk to people like Ralph who've seen it, what it used to be like. And if you're not proactive, it'd be a shame to be reactive where a fishery is just in complete collapse. And then you're waiting on the law to change to make an impact. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think I like it. It's going to take, just like you said, a mindset shift. And I mean, if you really think about it, there are some people out there, and we've heard from them because we have a pretty big Facebook group and an insider group, and Florida made some pretty drastic changes, and with redfish, speckled trout, and snook, on the Gulf Coast, you can't keep anything right now. And I think for the most part, people were rallying it behind it because, not just for ourselves, because you think about it, if you can't keep anything, that means should be more strikes. That means you should be catching more fish per trip. And, a lot of guys were saying, well, man, the whole reason I fish is to be able to feed my family. Let's be honest. It costs so much money per fish if you own a boat and you're paying for gas and you're paying for your rods and reels and lines and lures and your ice strike jig heads and everything else. I mean, the cost of that flounder or trout, I mean, it could be $100 a pound, if not more, versus, going to the grocery store, it's a whole lot cheaper. I'm not poking fun at anyone who keeps it, because we've had quite a few videos recently during this whole pandemic where we're keeping fish, not trout, because we're not legally allowed to in Florida, but we've kept a flounder, bluefish, Spanish mackerel, and talked about how to clean some of this. So I get that part of it, but then again, poking fun of ourselves. I mean, that was probably the most expensive flounder and bluefish and Spanish mackerel fillet ever. Just because of all the time and the nice skiff and all the other stuff that we had that went into it. But I like this, man. I think I really do think, just because I know what our mission is and I know what your mission is in terms of uniting anglers and just helping people go out there and catch more fish, not to keep more fish, but to catch more fish and create memories, and ultimately pass this love of fishing on to the next generation and the next generation after that. I think things like this are amazing ideas, and I really do hope it catches on. And like I said, everyone's different, right? It could be that you disagree with 20, but hey, if you catch anything over 24, I think the idea of just putting limits on yourself and just saying, you know what, I'm going to release all these fish, and just even having it in the back of your mind is I hope it takes hold, man. It'll be interesting to see where this whole release over 20 goes.
Well, I really appreciate you using your platform to help us spread the word. And that's really what it's about, getting it out, getting it out to anglers and letting us explain in a format like this in more detail. Because, you see release over 20 and, we already get comments on our page like release to the grease, and it's like, well, if you really listen to what we're talking about, you would understand we're not telling people to release everything.
Yep.
There's reasons, if you yourself want to catch more fish in the future, you'll do this as well,
Yep.
But people don't always want to dig into the why,
No, I agree. And what is your website or your Instagram? It's just release over 20. Is that where you find it?
Yeah, at release over 20.
Okay.
That's going to be the main social media. And if people want to, we're encouraging people to send us videos of them releasing their 20-inch fish or more. And we already had a giveaway. I think you interviewed Judd Brock.
Yep.
He's one of our team members, and he gave away a trout trip, and a guy down in Jacksonville won it. So we started, I think we had like 20 followers. We've got almost 400 now. Hopefully we'll get that up into the, way up into the thousands and get this thing rolling.
Yeah, well, I would encourage you guys, if you're listening to this, please go give them a follow there on Instagram and use the hashtag release over 20 as well. And let's talk too about the ice strike. This for a lot of people, this jig head kind of came out of nowhere. Even though I know you've been doing this for quite some time. And then the whole Z-Man thing with that distribution helped out big time, and we've been talking about like crazy ever since we found out about it. What's the latest there? You've got all kinds of new stuff. I love the Texas eye, and we've been using the weedless eye as well. What's the latest on the eye strike side?
Yeah, so it's probably a lot of people know of like trout eye jigs and redfish eye jigs and whatever from Z-Man. So we have an agreement. We're not the same company as Z-Man. We're an independent company, just have a partnership with them where they distribute our jigs under their name to all tackle shops around the country, with very few exceptions. And we are so honored and proud to be teamed up with Z-Man. The people there are amazing.
Yep.
I love their products. We used to fish other, a lot of gulps and stuff like that. So we really got joined up with Z-Man and started fishing their products in LazTech more. And I'll tell you right now, if today our agreement with them stopped, I would still continue to fish 100% Z-Man. I just am a huge fan of their products. Great company. So we have a lot of products that it's basically all about I always say it's about getting our eye into different ways of using them, like the weedless jig and the Texas eye, different ways of presenting that eye into places where you wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
Yep.
And we're just about to come out with some different size Texas eyes. It's been such a huge successful product. It's my favorite product that we make. Just a great combination of being weedless and not missing fish.
Yep.
That it's like, to me, it's like the ultimate. Plus it has a little killer app, which is like the clicking sound. I don't know if you've heard about that, but if you take the hook in the head and you sort of rattle them, it makes a clicking sound. It sounds like a shrimp. And I'd love to say that was by design, but it was kind of an accidental feature.
That's funny.
That Judd Brock actually discovered it, and he recorded it underwater, and he's like, I'm pretty sure this is why I can present this thing in muddy water, 5 feet away from a redfish, and he'll turn his head and go right to it. And, I think it's awesome. It's just, it's a great little feature that sort of happened with that. But we have a finesse size coming out with a 1/0 hook. We also have one we're calling the Texel, which is up to ½ ounce on a 5/0 hook. We've had a lot of people asking for those. The finesse, I had a few prototypes, like literally a handful of them. And the very first time I took those finesse ones out, I had what I call a margarita slam, which is people I'm sure don't know what that is. Here in Charleston, people sort of know what that is now, but what it is a brackish water slam. And it's a redfish, trout, flounder, striper, and a largemouth. And that's something that I try to catch that slam once a year.
Yeah.
And I've been able to do it, probably about 6 or 8 times, usually on different jigs. Sometimes, one like a striper will be in a topwater plug or something, but sometimes you could do it like Ralph and I'll go out and together as a boat we'll catch a margarita slam. But the first day I took that little finesse one out, I did what's kind of like the holy grail margarita slam, which is catching it solo, but with the same exact jig. So I had this little 3-inch Slim Slim in the Space Guppy color on that little Texas eye, and was able to catch not only that margarita slam on that, but then upgrade several of the fish. So it had 10 fish and, 3 striper, like a 2.5 pound largemouth, few trout, bunch of redfish. So that was exciting.
That's awesome.
I knew right then that thing was going to be a real winner. Now, I'm hoping that we get those in stock soon, but we've had some problems due to the virus with supplies, as most people have.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing that we have is called a gel bait. Have you heard of it? The sheep's head lure.
Yeah, I have not used it yet. I think Wyatt on our team, he's done some stuff with Judd, and he showed it to me, and he had a live crab on that thing, and he was taking it off and actually bit him, and it was on a Zoom call, so we were all dying laughing. But it looks crazy. I mean, it's got this massive one eye, but it looks awesome.
So I a little bit regret putting the eye on that thing, and the reason is that I feel like people focus on it too much. That the eye is not at all the point in that particular jig. The only reason we did that is because it's eye strike. It's sort of like marketing. And the few sheeps that we've caught on artificial lures have usually been on the pearl eye, and which is the same color eye that we use for the gel bait. And the thought is that maybe it looks like an oyster or barnacle or something. I don't know, but the eye is just kind of window dressing. But I'm really proud of that gel bait because it's one thing to make a jig head. You can make jig heads, but the jig head's not a new thing. Everyone's got. A lot of people have eyes. Ours are the biggest eyes, but an eye is not unusual in a jig head. Prongs are not unusual in a jig head. They're all kind of variations of the same thing. But the gel bait is nothing else. It's the first thing of its kind. There's nothing else like that on the market.
Yeah.
You know, it's the only sheep's head rig that lets you keep a live crab and secure it and have it lead directly over the hook points. And also, you know, when I designed this thing, I was kind of setting out to solve like the complaints about sheephead fishing is that it's really hard to feel the bite because a lot of times you have like a Carolina rig and you have a loose hook below a weight, and that fish will come in and crunch the crab and spit it back out, and you know you don't feel it till it's spitting it out. So having the weight be attached to the hook, you know, you could if your fingers on the line, you can feel it as soon as that moment that fish touches that jig. So that's trying to solve that problem. A lot of complaints about trying to hook a filler crab without killing it, cracking his shell, he falls off. This way you can strap him on there and he's directly above the hook points. You know, there's 2 hooks, so there's a double chance of hooking it up. The cool thing about this, and you know, as you know, if you ever look in a sheep's head's mouth, it's nothing but teeth.
Yeah.
So where is a hook going to land? There really isn't many places where a hook can penetrate into the inside of a sheep's head's mouth. But the cool thing about the gel bait is that it almost always hooks them in the lip because, you know, they're crunching that shell, and when you set that hook and those hooks are right below it, it gets it right in the lip, and those lips are really tough. So there's a place for those hooks to land in the lip, and if you look at all the pictures of catches, like 9 out of 10 times it's going to be hooked right there in the lip.
it's a cool bait.
I'm really proud of those just because it's like there's nothing else like it. I imagine there'll be people trying to copy it, which is fine. It's kind of how our industry goes, but we're just trying to innovate stuff and be the first to market and sort of claim being like the OG, you know, the original.
I love it, man. Well, yeah, definitely. Everyone go check them out on Instagram, Eye Strike Fishing, and obviously, you know, it's all over Z-Man and their trout eyes and redfish eye, and we talk about all the time too. We've done quite a few videos with those jig heads. So, man, good work, dude. This has been a really fun one. Certainly educational, and I think. I really do think this movement is going to be, you know, critical to the future of gator trout, and just, you know, the amount of trout we're catching in general from you know, regardless if you are in Charleston or in Florida, we are, or Texas. So I appreciate all that you're doing, man. You know, it's an active love. This is not a money making deal.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Anything else? Any other websites or any other social media places to go check you guys out?
Just want to let people know you can buy our jigs directly from us at eyestrikefishing.com, and we've kind of reserved the right to be the only place you can buy our jigs in bulk and save a lot of money, up to 30% off. So I encourage people to do that. We'd appreciate the business. We're a small business and you know, struggling to get by just like everybody else. And all our jigs are made in America.
Yep, I would encourage you to check out the big sampler pack. That is one that I've personally purchased from you guys. It's like is it 170 jig heads or something like that?
Yeah, it's basically every jig we make in every color. So it just kind of gives you a if you don't know which jigs you're going to like, you just buy that and then you'll quickly find out.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to a brewery for the first time, and you know, and getting those little samplers. That's such a cool way to try a bunch of beers. So
that's right, and also, of course, you know, we highly encourage people to buy our jigs through Z-Man in the blue packaging. You'll see them in your tackle shop. And if your tackle shop has Z-Man lures, but they don't have Eye Strike jigs, you just need to ask, and because they are able to get them, they just need to get their distributor to stock them.
Yep. Excellent. Dave, my friend, this has been excellent. If you're listening and driving or working out, we'll have all of this on the show notes, including you know, links to all the Instagram channels that we talked about. We'll put some of those stats that we talked about in terms of why these 20-inch trout are so important. We'll put some of those stats in there, and obviously some links to Ice Strike and to Z-Man where you can buy all this stuff. So, guys, thank you so much. Dave, thank you so much. And everyone, we'll talk to you on the next episode. We're out.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was pain.